So now let's just quickly implement the login. Okay, we will allow the user to log in. So when the user click on the login button, then in that case we are going to call a method which will be basically validate form, which is basically our login form. So let's implement this method. Here above the widget build, we can say validate form, and first we will check that if the email text heading controller dot text dot is not empty. If this is not empty, and also if the password text heading controller, if this is also not empty, then in that case we are going to allow the user to log in. Otherwise, else we will display the error message using the Flutter toast. We can tell the user that is please provide email and password. And if the email and password has been provided by the user, then we can log in the user. Okay, so we can just say login now. We will call this method and let's implement it. Here above the widget build, we can say login now. It will be asynchronous. Now here, just like in the registration, when we display the loading dialog box, okay, this one, we will just copy it and we will paste that here. We will say first import the loading dialog dot, and then we can say allowing you, or you can say checking credentials. Okay, and then we will authenticate. You can say login. So just like we did here, okay, this piece of code which is user up to this error record. So let's copy this, and after the show dialog we can just paste that here. First import user which belongs to Firebase or dot, and then instead of create user with email and password, we are going to call sign in with email and password. Okay, sign in with email and password. So if that user is signed in successfully using the provided email and password, then this dot then will execute. That is, it will get the logged in user information, that is current user. Otherwise, if any error occur, then this dot catch will execute and it will show us the desired error message. Now after this, we are going to first check, that is if current user is not equals to null, then in that case we are going to first check, that is if that specific user who is trying to log in, if his or her record exists in the user collection or not. Okay, if that specific record exists or not in the database. Okay, if that record do not exist, we will simply tell the user that no record exists related to this specific user, so we will not allow that specific user. So here I'm going to call a method which will be check if user record exists. This is a method name. Okay, and we will now implement it. We will pass current user to it as a parameter. Let's implement this above the widget build. We can say check if user record exists, and we will receive the user as a parameter here, which is current user. So first of all, we will make a reference to the user's collection and that specific user who is trying to log in. Using that specific user UID, we will check if that record exists or not. So we can say here, let's make this asynchronous, and we can say wait Firebase firestore.instance.collection. The collection is the user's collection, and then that specific user who is trying to log in. So we can say dot document current user dot UID dot get dot then. Let's give this name as record. So we can say that, okay, inside the user's collection, that specific user who is trying to log in. So if that record exists, we can say if record dot exists. If the record exists, then the second thing which we will check is basically that specific, let's say if this user is trying to log in, then if that exists, if the record exists, the next thing that we will check is basically the status. We will check if the status is approved, only then we will allow that user to log in. Okay, first of all, if the record, as I told you, record exists. What if the record do not exist? Then of course the else statement will execute. We will tell the user that is record not exist. Okay, so using the Flutter toast dot show toast, and we say this record do not exist, or you can say you are not a user whose record exists. Okay, this record do not exist. And then the next thing, as I told you, we will check that if the status is approved, only then we will allow to logged in. So let's check that also. So we can say if record dot data, and we are going to check the specific status. Okay, so we can say status. So if that status become equals to, make sure to use the same spellings, okay, because on the basis of it we will also implement some features in the admin web portal. So we can say if that is approved, then allow the user to log in, which simply means send user to home screen. But before doing that, we have to save the data locally also for that specific user. So this is also simple. We have already done that on the registration page. When the registration is successful, then we save the UID, email, name, and photo URL. So let's just copy up to photo URL and then paste that here, just like this, and make sure to add here after .then, make this asynchronous. Okay, and also import the shared preferences which belongs to global dot. Now at the time when the user log in, you already know that we already retrieved the record from the database. Okay, this is not the sign up where we can use we have no text editing controller for the name or for the email, etc. Okay, so we will get the information from using this record. So how we can do that? Well, we can simply say here, that is just like we check the status, we will say if the record data related for the name, okay, the key name which is name, And then for the photo URL, we have photo URL, so we can just copy paste this here, photo URL, comma, and the key name is also photo URL. That's it. Okay. And in case of login, as you know that for the registration we set the user card default value to initial value, but in case of login, as you know that, let's say there may be a user who is already sign up, who is registered already, so he is now trying to log in. Let's say he log in and he adds some item to the carts. After that he log out, that is sign out from the app. So the cart contains some items. Okay, so in this case we will first check using the shared preferences. We will check if the cart has items, or let's say even if it has the initial value which we set during also the sign up. For example, like this, we set the default value to the list as initial value. So here we will basically get all the values or all the items which is already in the cart. That is, we will get that list. So we can say we can create an instance of list of type string, and we can give it name as user cart list, and whatever is inside the cart, basically you know that this record is coming from the Firestore. Okay, so we are getting this user cart from the database. So let's say if the user already adds some items in the cart, okay, and then after it he logged out from the app, then the cart contains some items which we have to retrieve. So inside the users collection, let's say this is the online user, the UID, okay, this is the record, complete record which we get, to which we make a reference. The users collection, that specific online user, okay, we get that record. So just like we using this record, we get from the record we get the name, the photo URL, the email, and the UID. In the same way we can basically get other information from it also. For example, if you want to get the email from the record instead from the authentication, this is we are getting from the authentication. Okay, let's say if you want to get it from the Firestore, then all you need is just to write here like this. As you know, in the record we have email by the key name email, so we can just say email. Okay, just like this. For example, the UID you can also get from the record using the UID key name. Okay, while this current user represents the authentication, you already know that this current user we are getting from the authentication, which is basically this UID and this email. Okay, so I hope you know the difference between this, and I hope you understand everything which I am saying. So even this will work, okay, because this is coming from the authentication. But if you want, you can do using the record also. This record is basically all the way coming from the Firestore, from the user collection for that online user who is trying to log in, or who is already logged in, you can say. So yeah, in this way. And then the cart is basically by the name user cart, so we can say record dot data, just like we did for the other information, and it is by the name user cart, so we can say user cart, and we can cast it to string, so we can say dot cast string. Okay, so we get the user cart, whatever the item is inside the user cart, we get all those items and we assign it to our list, which is user cart list from the database. Okay, and we assign it to our user cart list. Then we can say wait, we have to share it now using the shared preferences. So shared preferences dot set string list, and the key name we are going to share it by the same key name, which is user cart. Okay, and the value of which is saved inside the list, which is user cart list. So yeah, this is so simple and so easy, and we will send the user to the home screen. okay, just like this. So let me explain the code quickly one more time. First of all, as you know that when the user provide the email and password, let me just provide any wrong email password which do not exist in the database. Let's say this one. Okay, so on clicking the login button, it just start displaying this. Okay, but as you know, error occurred because when we check here using the authentication, okay, sign in with email and password, then this email, okay, which we provide, this even do not, this record, or you can say this thing do not exist in the authentication. Okay, you can see this email do not exist in the authentication. So if it is not exist in the authentication, then it will skip the .then successful statement and it will execute this one. Okay, as you know, in case of error, it is executing this one, that is error message, and it displays the error message, which is there is no user record corresponding to this identifier. Okay, and it just return from here. Now let's say if I provide the correct email, which is ali@gmail.com, and the correct password, then in that case it will execute .then. That is, it will get the auth information of the user and it will assign it to current user. Then we check if that information is not equals to null, that is, if the auth information exists, then check also in the database the record for that user. For example, inside the user collection, inside the user collection, that specific user whose ID is, for Ali, this is the UID 5RM. Okay, if you come here inside the users collection, we check. So we say inside the user collection if that specific UID exists, which is this one 5RM. Okay, this one, then if that user exists in the user collection, then simply get that record. Okay, .get, simply get that record, okay, which is assigned to this record. So we then check if record exists, then check if inside that record there is a status. Inside that record, okay, there is a status. If that status value is equal to approved, only then allow the user to log in successful. That is, we shared that specific user data locally to the phone. Example, from the record we get the UID value, then the email, then the name and photo URL. Okay, from the record we simply means that we retrieve it from the user collection for that specific user. Okay, so we get the values from here for the name, photo URL, and the status, of course. Okay, this information, that is the UID, email, name and photo URL, and we share it to the phone storage using the shared preferences. That is, we share it to the local storage using shared preferences. Similarly, we also from the record I simply means that is from the Firestore. Okay, we retrieve, as you can see here, this record is coming from the Firestore, from the user collection for that specific user. So we get the user cart, okay, whatever is inside that cart, we assign it to our user cart list, and then we also shared the user cart list to the local storage using the shared preferences, and after that we send the user to the home screen in order to use the app. Now, as you know, in case if the record do not exist, then we execute this else statement, that is, this record do not exist. And also we have to execute one more step here, that is, in case of failure, we can say firebase auth.instance dot sign out. Okay, just write this here also. And also, if the status is not approved, then in that case we will execute the else statement, and we will tell, that is, status is not approved. Then we will tell to the user, that is, you have been blocked by admin. Okay, contact admin, and then we will of course tell the admin email. For example, let's say you have blocked by admin. Okay, /n. In the next line we will say contact admin, and then write the admin email. For example, let's say the company email, or let's say the company admin email is admin@ishop.com. okay, so we tell the user contact admin, and this is the admin email, admin@ishop.com. so yeah, that's it. Now let's test the app again. Okay, for the other statements, that is, let's say if the record do not exist, okay, I'm going to provide the correct email, which is, let's say, ali@gmail.com, which is exist in the authentication. So I will simply say ali@gmail.com and then correct password. Okay, but this time, as I told you, we are going to delete his record just to see if our conditions are working successfully or not. First of all, as you know, this is Ali. Okay, I'm going to change the status to not approved so that we can see if it is working or not. So I'm going to click on login. You have blocked by admin, contact admin. Okay, so it is not allowing you to log in because you are blocked. So also make sure to write here one more thing, which is to disappear this dialog box. So we can say navigator.pop context. Okay, and also here in this else statement, let's try again. This time as you know, the status is not approved, so now when we click on the login, then it will execute this one, that is the else statement. Okay, you are blocked by admin, contact admin. Now if the record do not exist, then in that case, if the record do not exist, then this else statement will execute. Okay, this one will execute. So I'm going to, let's manually delete this record. Okay, first of all we can say delete document. Okay, delete document. So you know now that is in the authentication, that user record is authenticated. I mean the authentication information is present, which is basically the user email, the UID, and the creation time and sign in, last time sign in information. But in the Firestore database, his or her record is not exist. Okay, because we deleted, because we want to check if this condition is executing or not, if the record do not present in the database. So let's just click on login this time, and it will say this record do not exist. Okay, or the proper word will be this user record do not exist. So this is all about our login. Okay, let's delete this ali@gmail from here as well. Okay, so this is all about our login feature. Now this time I'm going to log in using peter@gmail.com and then password. Let's log in. And yeah, logged in successfully, Peter Parker. In the next video we will work on the sign out feature.